Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in. I hope you all had a happy and safe Holi celebration with your family today. I welcome all of you today for the session on stress management. And to speak on this important topic, we have Ms. Sobhana Jaya-Madhavan. Ms. Sobhana is has an undergraduate degree in philosophy from the Calicut University, Kerala, and a postgraduate degree in social work from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Since 1991, Shobhana has worked in non-profit, public and private sector in India, Malaysia and Canada. After immigrating from Canada in 1995, Shobhana has worked with the government of British Columbia for about 20 years. From 2015 to 17, Shobhana has worked with Newgen Knowledge Works as a head HR and associate vice president. And in 2017, Shobhana returned to Canada and joined the Simon Fraser University as Associate Vice President, External Relations. Shobhana continues to be very connected to India through her volunteer and mentorship work. She's been a volunteer since the age of 16 when she became the president of Rotaract Club. She's passionate about lifelong learning, traveling, and peace. So, with this introduction, I request Shobhana Madam to kindly address our students. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Ram. Good morning, everyone. I'm connecting with you from Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, and really happy that we can connect with each other and talk about an important topic like stress management today. But before I get started, wish you all a very happy Holi, and I hope you're all doing well during this very difficult time of ours during the pandemic. So I'm going to take a minute to go over what I'm going to cover today, which is going to be one of our first slides. So while Ramya pulls up the slide about what we're going to cover today, I hope all of you are sitting comfortably and feeling relaxed and not stressed, and hope you'll enjoy the presentation this morning. Evening for you. So today's presentation is going to focus on stress management, as you know, and how to prevent and manage stress. And we're going to talk about a number of things. So in the next slide, I've just put down a few thoughts on what we're going to cover today. And I want to start off by saying, मेरा हिंदी इतना अच्छा नहीं है इसलिए मैंने Google Translate use किया. So hopefully most of my translations here, which is from Google Translate, is reasonably accurate. So I'm going to sort of touch on the definition, understanding stress, what are some of the factors, what are some of the signs, and how we can prevent and manage stress. And finally, I want to just end off with some reflections, like my own personal experiences throughout my life. I'm 53 years old, so been through, 5 decades of all kinds of experiences as a young person, a student, a young professional, and then in my mid-career and now in a senior management position. What are some of the thoughts and experiences I have in terms of managing stress? So let's take a look at the definition of stress. As you probably know, there are many definitions for any terms. So when we look at stress, the simplest one that we could go towards is picking up the dictionary and taking a look at what do they define stress as. So a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances is usually referred to as stress. The key point here is it's a state of mind. It's how we feel within ourselves, how we feel in our mind, that usually refers to stress. And there's all kinds of stress, and I'll touch on it in a second. But I just want to make sure when I use the word stress, all of us here in the group today have the same understanding. So let's take a look at the next slide and go a little bit deeper into understanding stress. We use the word stress all the time, right? मुझको बहुत stress है, or my friend has a lot of stress today, or my parents are very stressed. We use that word quite a bit in our daily life. What really happens when we are in a stressed mode or when we are going through stress? Basically, it's a physical reaction that happens within our brain, and certain signals are sent to certain parts of the brain. So, for instance, if we look at what the medical explanation of stress is, we can see that when someone experiences a stressful event or a stressful situation, the amygdala, an area of the brain that contributes to emotional processing, which means that's the part of the brain from where we feel emotions, like we feel joy, we feel anger, we feel fear. All of those things are processed in a certain part of the brain. So basically, there is a reaction, and then, in a certain part of the brain, there is a bit of a event that happens, and then it sends a distress signal. So imagine an ambulance now going on the street in front of your home. It'll be having its flashing lights on, it'll be making, a lot of noise. That's a distress signal. So our mind gets a distress signal, and then we react in certain ways and we feel stressed. Now, it's important to know it's not only when we are in danger that we have this stress response, we also will have it when, let's say, we are in the middle of an athletic competition. If you and I are running this morning a 100-meter dash and the whistle blows, we'll probably have that reaction because it's a stressful environment, but it's not always a negative environment. So it's important to understand how our brain reacts during a stressful time, because then we will have a better control over that reaction. So, in the next few minutes, I will be talking about how we can manage it. But for the time being, I want you to understand that it's really a physiological or a physical reaction to a situation which makes our brain react in a certain way. So let's take a look at the next slide and let's understand some of the factors. So there are many factors, right? So, like right now, if you're feeling relaxed, there are many factors and reasons for it. If you're feeling a bit stressed right now, there are probably many reasons for it. So I want you to take a moment to understand that there are many factors. They could be psychological or emotional, they could be financial, they could be environmental, or they could be social factors, and there are other factors too. So let's take a look at some of these concepts and some of examples that I have for you. So some of the factors could be pressures. So, for example, I understand from Ramya and others at Tata Institute that many of you are getting ready for exams. So, exams, especially in certain parts of the world like India, is a very stressful period, right? Because you have to prepare a lot, you have to cover a lot of syllabus. It's usually a written exam where you have to memorize a lot of things, and it's a bit stressful generally, right? So, when you have those pressures like exams or deadlines, it's natural to feel stress. The other factor could be changes, right? So, if you are, for instance, going to get married, even though it's a joyful event for most people, it can also be a bit stressful because there's lots of things to organize and to think about. Or let's say you're going through a major change in your life, like someone in your family is going through a divorce. That individual could be going through a lot of stress, and family members could also be going through a lot of stress. Having worries is also stressful. So, for example, if I have to pay rent on the 1st of April, but my paycheck hasn't arrived, it could be a very stressful time. So, financial problems could also make us feel quite stressed. Let's take a look at what the next a factor or example is responsibilities. We all have responsibilities. No matter how young or old you are, we all have responsibilities. So, for example, let's just say, for example, I'm responsible for taking care of an elderly parent, and I have, young children, and I have to work full time, and I have to do a lot of the work around the house. All these responsibilities together might end up being a stressful situation or a factor for me. Let's move on to the next factor, and it is uncertainty. Uncertainty meaning we don't know what's going to happen. So, for example, let's just say you're in the final year of your university program. You're going to write your exams. And after this, you have to apply for a job, but you don't know what your career is going to be, what the future is going to be. It is quite natural to feel a bit of stress about it. We have all gone through it. I've gone through it myself when I graduated from my MSW. The last factor that I've put down here with some examples is no control. So, for example, let's just say that it's raining heavily outside, and I take my umbrella and I step out, and I'm going for a very important meeting. I'm dressed up professionally, and the wind blows and it starts to rain and my umbrella flies off and I get completely drenched or wet. And now I don't look professional when I'm walking into a meeting. That can be a stressful moment for me. Or if you're going for an interview and the same thing happens, whether we have no control over it, right? And so it can be stressful. Or in many of our lives, we have experienced a loved one passing away. So when there's a death of a family or a friend or someone you care about, it can be a very, very stressful factor, but you have no control over it, right? So these are some of the ways we need to understand stress so that it becomes easier to prevent and manage it. So this is not a complete list, it's a partial list, but it gives you an idea that we have a number of factors that fall into different categories like psychological, environmental, financial, and social factors. So let's move on to the next slide and take a look at the two main baskets or categories under which stress factors generally fall into. And these are external and internal. As the word suggests, external is anything outside of you, right? That it's not within you, it's outside of you. So, for example, what goes on in the university, what goes on in my work, or what happens with our finances or money, they're all external factors. So, what are some of the internal factors, right? So, some of the internal factors, as I've noted on the slide, it's negativity. So, for example, if you have a tendency to be negative all the time, you know oh, this is not working out, the whole world is against me, people hate me, my boss hates me, my friends hate me, God is unkind to me. So if you have a negative thought process and there's a lot of negativity within you, it can lead to a lot of stress. So what's the next internal factor, right? It's not being flexible. So, being flexible, think for a moment that you're watching a river flow, right? When the water flows, one of the reasons why it's so peaceful when water flows gently is because it's got a flexible nature. It flows between rocks, it flows between bushes, it flows in a way that is able to adjust and adapt to its environment. Whereas if you look at the rock, near a riverbed, if you look at the rock, it stays put and it's stuck in one spot. It's not able to move. So even if something comes close to it, it's not able to shift and adapt very easily. Though over time in nature, things do change, including rocks. Generally speaking, when you're like the river, you're more flexible. When you're like the rock, you're not very flexible. And so you're not able to adapt and change to the situation. The last internal factor I want to touch on is unrealistic expectations. So, for example, you have your exams coming up. There's only 24 hours in a day for all of us. No matter how we would like to change that, we cannot change that. There's only 24 hours. So, let's just say that you study for about 10 hours a day, and then you do things around the house, you spend some time with friends, you relax, you go for a jog or for a walk, and then you sleep for a couple of hours. If someone comes and tells you, no, 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 you have exams and you have to study for 20 hours a day, that's a bit unrealistic, isn't it? Because when do you sleep? When do you rest? When do you do other things? Sometimes we put a lot of unrealistic expectations on ourselves, and it leads to a stressful situation. So let's say, for example, I have a tendency to read something 3 times and then I get it. If I put pressure on myself to understand something the first time I read it, that's a bit unrealistic because the way my brain works, it takes a bit more time. I need to have someone explain something to me. So, by putting unnecessary, unrealistic expectations on ourselves, we can get pretty stressed out, especially during exams. So, it's important to make sure we understand our external and internal stress factors so that we can have some way of managing it and also preventing it better. So let's take a look at the next slide, and it's going to be touching on what some of the signs are. I want to spend some time on this slide because all of us at different points in our life, we have been very stressed. Right now, during the pandemic, COVID 19, and all the problems that we're all facing in our lives, in school, in university, in our homes, there is a great deal of stress in people's life. So let's focus on this slide, and it's an important slide. So I'm going to leave it there on the screen so that you can pay attention to the messages, especially in the red. So there are many signs, like there are many factors. So there are cognitive signs, there are psychological signs, there are physical signs, and there are behavioral signs. It is very important, all of us, irrespective of our age, our background, our religion, what we do for a living, what our family situation is, what our work situation is, it is important to understand these signs. Some of the examples of the cognitive signs are lack of concentration and memory loss. So we have all heard, friends and family members, even we ourselves might have said, मुझको concentrate करना बहुत मुश्किल है, or मुझको याद नहीं है. I studied this so many times, but I cannot remember. I have forgotten, right? So cognitive problems are like concentration, memory loss, those kind of issues. Let's take a look at the next sign, psychological signs. So, for example, depression, suicidal thoughts. These are all psychological signs. Some of us, or all of us at different points in time, may have gone through some of these things. Or we might have friends or family, neighbors, classmates who are going through this. The reason I put Deepika Padukone's photograph on this slide is because you might be aware she was very frank and open about her own problems with depression. So, a couple of years ago, Deepika uh, realized that she's suffering from depression. So, she took professional help and then she started to talk about it. I have put a couple of resources in the end, and you will take a look at it later. And I've given the links for Deepika Padukone's foundation called Live, Laugh, Live, Love, Laugh. I think that's what the foundation is called. And basically, she talks about a number of issues. It is very important to know that psychological factors are very serious factors. So, if anybody is going through depression, or if anybody is having suicidal ideas, sometimes it might be just a thought. We get so upset, we get so stressed out that we might be under so much pressure that we might say, oh, I wish I could end my life. In some cases, that thought stays on for a very long period of time, and people start thinking too much about it. That's when it becomes a problem, and we need to make sure we talk to somebody. So, I've added some links for helplines in the resource slide in the end, and we'll take a look at it later. So let's stay on this slide. And we have to remember that we could also have physical symptoms. So, for example, if we have sudden chest pain, or we feel that somebody is grabbing us and we just can't breathe, those are physical symptoms. Or it could be diarrhea, and it's not because we ate food that is bad, but it's because we are stressed. What about behavioral signs? We could eat too much or too little, or we could sleep too much or sleep too little. These are all signs that there's something going on internally and we are in a state of stress and we need to do something about it. So make sure that you take some time after the presentation today or during the week or before your exams to take a look at some of the links, especially the link at the bottom of the screen, and go and read it and try to get a little bit more details about the importance of recognizing signs and how you can get some help. Let's move on to the next slide. And here we are going to be looking at how to prevent and manage stress. So, for instance, if we think about good health, right? If we need to be healthy, we need to eat well, we need to eat healthy food, we need to eat less junk food or fast food, which, you know, maybe some of you really love, especially now in India. Fast food and junk food is easily available and sometimes also, I would say, not too expensive. So, more and more people are eating foods very different from the time I was growing up. So, when I was growing up, there was no fast food, and there definitely wasn't a big selection of junk foods. So, you ate what your grandparents or your parents cooked for you, and it was generally homemade, healthy ingredients that were used. Whereas now, if you are growing up anywhere in the world, even whether it's in Canada or in India or any part of the world, you have access to a lot of foods that are not necessarily healthy. So a lot of people are putting on weight, even young people, there's high levels of obesity and health issues, and there's a lot of concern. So I want to spend a bit of time looking at this slide and looking at some of the factors. So eating a healthy diet is very important because good food is like good medicine, right? So in Indian recipes and in Indian uh, food, for instance, there are a lot of ingredients that are very good for preventing and managing stress. So eating a healthy diet is very important. Let's look at what the next factor is. It is getting regular exercise. Sometimes you must have read, stressed out, go and work out. One of the best ways you can deal with stress is by getting regular exercise. Whether it's 30 minutes of yoga every morning, whether it's 45 minutes of going for a jog, or whether it's going for a long walk, whether it's going to the gym, going for a swim, it doesn't matter what the activity is. If there is no way to do any of these things, playing music on YouTube, closing your room door or leaving it open and just dancing for a few minutes will shake off the stress and make you feel better. So it's very easy when you recognize you're under stress to actually reduce that stress or get rid of it by getting physically active. So I do this all the time, whether at home or before COVID when at work. If it's a difficult day for me or if it's a stressful day for me, I just take what I call a micro break, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and just step out and go for a walk, a brisk, quick walk, and just enjoy nature or listen to some music. And when I come back, sit at my desk or come back to my home, I usually feel stress free. So these are very easy ways we can prevent and manage stress. Regular physical activity is critical, not just for physical health, but also for mental health. So making that time every day, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour, will make a huge difference in your life. Let's take a look at the next factor, and it is about practicing relaxation, right? So, especially in a place like India, you hear about yoga, you hear about laughing yoga. There are many ways we can relax through meditation, going to a temple or a mosque or a church and sitting down and praying for a bit, or in your own home, just putting a mat on the floor, closing your eyes and meditating. These are all ways we can relax. A lot of people listen to music, right? Like my children, I have two sons who are 20 and 23, so perhaps your age, and they relax a lot by basically, listening to music, So you can do many things to relax, and it's important to find out how you best relax and then doing it on a regular basis, couple of times during the day or at least once or twice a day so that the stress levels are low in your body. Let's take a look at the next factor, and that is taking time for hobbies. So when we are very young, so let's say we are in grade, you know, 2 or 3 or 4, and through our teenage years, we usually have lots of hobbies. So people would say, "Oh, I collect stamps," or "I like to play video games," or "I like to play the guitar," "like to read," or "like to cook." People have a lot of hobbies when they're young. As they get older, sometimes they have less hobbies or no hobbies at all, or they might say, "I love doing these things, but I have no time." What research has found is that when we have hobbies, no matter what our age, we are generally physically and mentally active. So, my mother lives with me and she's 81 years old. She just turned 81 this week. And my mother has a lot of hobbies. She likes to knit, she likes to stitch, she likes to do a little bit of fabric painting, she likes to read, she loves to watch shows, Indian shows, and she loves to walk and listen to music. So she's got a lot of hobbies. And so it keeps her really healthy and keeps her sharp and in good spirits. She's generally a happy person. And that's because of hobbies. I'm 53 years old and I have lots of hobbies too. I love music. I love traveling. I love reading. I love going for drives with my young sons in our truck. I, spend a lot of time learning new things, learning new activities. And even though I'm 53, I have coloring books with crayons and color pencils, and I do very tiny, designs. Which requires a lot of concentration. So you have to color inside the small boxes or circles. So I'm able to focus, put some energy into that activity, have fun, and get rid of my stress. So, at any age, having hobbies is very important. And I hope all of you have hobbies and make time for hobbies. Let's take a look at the next factor, and that is building healthy relationships. So, there are all kinds of relationships, right? We have relationships with our parents or our siblings, like brothers and sisters. We have relationships with our relatives, cousins, aunties, uncles. We have relationships with our neighbors, relationships with our friends, with our professors or teachers. There are all kinds of relationships, personal and professional, but not all of them are healthy. Some of them can be very toxic because there is control, or there is anger, or there is abuse, or there is unkindness in those relationships. And we have all experienced it at different points in our life. At times, it may be happening in your life right now where you have unhealthy relationships. You might be in a relationship that is romantic, where there might be some kind of a negativity or abuse or hurt, and that could be a very stressful factor, in your life. So, learning to have healthy relationships, be with people who make you feel good, be with people who respect you, treat you well. Those are very important throughout our life, but especially in our adulthood. So let's pay some attention to it. And if a relationship is unhealthy and it's making you stressful, whether it's in your home, it's in your university, in your workplace, or in your romantic personal life, whatever be the case, pay attention to it. Talk to someone if it is bothering you. Let's take a look at the next factor, and it is volunteering. There is an incredible amount of research, a lot of research that says people who volunteer, people who do volunteer work in their communities, who do volunteer works around the world, people who give time to others, to make others feel better, to help others, they generally have less stress in their life and they're able to also live a much happier life. I started to volunteer when I was about 15 years old. It happened quite accidentally. I joined the Road Track Club in my hometown called Palakkad in South India, in Kerala. It's on the border of Kerala and Tamil Nadu, and some of you might have traveled to Kerala and passed my town. In Palakkad, we didn't have much when I was growing up in terms of volunteer activities. But when I got into Road Track Club, I understood what volunteer work was, what community service was. So I started to volunteer in a boys' orphanage in my hometown. And I experienced such a great deal of satisfaction. And I realized that I want to do this for the rest of my life. And that's what led me into social work. And throughout my life, I have volunteered. So, right now, like I said, I'm 53 years old. I work full time as AVP at a university here in British Columbia called Simon Fraser University. I live with my mother and my two sons. And like India, we don't have people to come and do housework and cooking and cleaning, uh, gardening. We do everything ourselves here most of the time. So there's a lot on my plate. But one of the things that helps me feel happy, feel at peace, reduce, prevent, and manage my stress well is my volunteer work. So every week I volunteer anywhere from 5 to 10 hours and help individuals and organizations both here in Canada and in India, and it makes me feel great. I think it's one of the reasons why I'm at peace and not too stressed, and that's volunteer work. So if you don't volunteer right now in your community or in India, try to find a volunteer opportunity, and I'm sure you'll feel great. So let's move on to the next factor, and that's seeking professional counseling when needed. You may remember I had spoken earlier about suicide and depression and how it's important to get help. All of us go through problems. There is nobody on this planet who does not have problems. Sometimes those problems are so serious we cannot manage it on our own. We can talk to our friends, we can talk to our professors, we can talk to our parents, brothers, sisters, cousins, even neighbors sometimes, or a stranger on a bus. Sometimes that is not enough. We have to take help from a professional counselor. So, an example would be if I have a toothache this morning and my tooth is hurting and I cannot eat or drink anything, there's nothing much I can do on my own. I could try putting some clove oil, gargling with some hot water and salt, you know, doing a couple of homemade remedies. But if it doesn't help me enough, what do I do next? I go to the dentist. I need to take professional help and fix my tooth problem. It's the same with psychological problems. If we can't solve it ourselves, we cannot fix it ourselves. We cannot fix it after talking to somebody. We need to get help. We need to call a helpline, or we need to go see a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist and talk to them because they are the experts in that area. Let's move on to the next slide and let's talk a little bit about resilience. This is a word that some of you might have heard before, or it might be a new term. So I've put the Hindi equivalent translation there, and hopefully it's the right one. So being resilient has been found to be one of the best protections against stress. So, being resilient or resilience is not just about our ability to bounce back, right? It's also our capacity to adapt in the face of challenging circumstances. So, for example, we have all heard, we have all seen people, or we have seen videos of individuals who have been in a bad accident and they have hurt themselves. And after that, they cannot walk, or they cannot use their hands, or they've lost their eyesight, or they cannot hear anymore. And these individuals have not only bounced back, they have also adapted to their challenging, difficult life, new life, and they have done something great with it, right? This is called resilience. When we fall down and we don't just stay there, we get up, or we crawl, or we do something to bring ourselves back to living a good life and making the best of our circumstances and capacities. So, resilience is not just a personal trait. It's not like I am born resilient or not. It is something we can acquire and learn to be over time. So, for example, let's just say I don't know how to ride a motorbike and I love motorbikes. It's not that when I'm born, I have to know how to ride a motorbike or I never will. Over time, I can learn to do it. I can learn to practice it and I can learn to get good at it. We can all learn to be resilient, and it'll be a great protection for us against stress. So go and research a little bit about resilience, and you'll be very interested to know about the many ways in which we can all become resilient. Let's take a look at the next slide. And this one, I basically pulled together some of the resources I used to prepare this brief presentation for all of you. And I've also put some links at the bottom in red for helplines. It is very important you're aware of helplines in India. It is free of cost. It's usually run by NGOs, non governmental organizations, social service organizations, and sometimes by governments also. And many of these have the support of different individuals, including film stars, government officials, people who are doing different things. TIS is involved in providing some of these services, and you can easily access it with just a cell phone or from a friend's house using their phone, by email, or by going on a Facebook group. There are many ways in which you can access help. So it's important to know what these resources are. Some of the links take you to Deepika's foundation. There are some great resources there. There are some articles I've included for you. I know you're busy with exams, so you may not have much time. But when you're taking a break, just go check it out. And I'm sure that you'll find it interesting and beneficial. So on the last slide, I've basically given you some ways to connect with me. And can we move on to the next slide, please? Uh, yeah, so thank you very much. And I would love Ramya to open it up for Q&A. And I want to say something. I know that in the chat function, you're all probably posting comments and some messages for me. Sorry, when I'm presenting, it's very difficult to also take a look at the all the comments and reply to you individually. But thank you for your messages and for listening to me. And I'm looking forward to a really engaging conversation and happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Students, now we've opened the chat window for question answers. You all can post your questions in the chat window.
You can ask any question. And if it's a personal question and you're not comfortable asking a very personal question, you can always say, someone in my family or a friend, someone I know is going through this. What can they do? You don't have to reveal anything personal if you don't want to. Thank you.
Ma'am, one question. Stress is usually thought as a negative experience, but can it also be a positive one?
Yes, absolutely. Stress is both positive and negative. So earlier in the presentation, remember I talked about if you and I were doing a running race this morning, 100 meters dash, when the whistle goes, we feel stress. That's actually a positive kind of stress, right? Because it pushes us and makes us run fast. Uh, there are many types of stress that's positive, and that's actually good to have when you go into to make a presentation. You might have positive stress. You have all kinds of chemicals released in your body and your brain that actually makes you perform well. Negative stress is something that actually creates dangerous psychological or physical symptoms or cognitive symptoms that could lead to terrible problems. So for example, if somebody has terrible chest pain because of stress, they could get a heart attack, and that's not positive, it's negative. So excellent question.
Another question is it possible to completely eliminate stress?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think especially for those of us who have our roots in India, We've all read about how, sadhus or sannyasis or people who do a tremendous amount of meditation and very healthy living are able to eliminate all stress. There probably is still a little bit of stress from time to time, but generally speaking, they might be more zen than others. There are many techniques, there are many ways in which we can dramatically reduce stress. So, one of the things I would like to do with all of you before we end the session, and Ramya will tell me when it's time to do that, is a small exercise. So, I will share with you something I do all the time, which I find very easy to eliminate stress.
Yes, ma'am. How common is stress-related problems at work?
It is unfortunately very common because work, even if it's work that we love doing and we are passionate about, there's all kinds of things that happen in a workplace. Very few jobs, very few professions, and very few people are honestly able to say, I experience no stress at work, or I experience very stress at work, very little stress at work. Now, why do we have so much stress at work? It's because people have to go through a lot often, even to get to work. So I remember when I was head of HR in Chennai between 2015 and 2017, a lot of the young people who worked in my company used to say, coming to work, traveling for 1 hour, 2 hours in the traffic is making me very stressed. So by the time I get to work, I'm already stressed. Then when they finish work, it takes another 1, 2 hours to travel, get through traffic, get home. So when they get home, they're very tired. And then when they get home, there's all kinds of demands and problems at home. And then that makes them even more stressed, right? So the work conditions also might make us stressful. So, for example, if you need a good laptop or a computer to do your job, but your company doesn't give you a proper usable laptop or a computer, but they give you deadlines to finish things on time, then it'll be very difficult. So, there are a lot of conditions. The other workplace stress is money, right? If companies make you work hard, but they don't pay you well, then at the end of the month, even though you worked so many days, you just don't have money to pay for everything. That could create stressors in the workplace because now you're frustrated and you're upset. So there's a lot of stressors that come out as a result of workplace environment, how people treat you, how you have a positive or negative relationship with your boss. So it's very important for us to be aware of it because some of these things we can change, right? We can talk to people, we can change our jobs, we can ask help from HR. So it's very important to be aware what those workplace stresses are.
Yes, ma'am. There's a question from Suman Jyoti. She's asking, how can I tell whether my worry is productive or toxic?
That's a very good question, isn't it? So basically, it's through self awareness, right? So it's very important to be self aware. So let me give you an example, right? Let's just say that, you meet somebody and you're talking to them and they make you feel uncomfortable by the way they look or the comments they pass or the questions they ask. If you're self aware, you know that this conversation is toxic, it's not positive. So, because you're self aware, you will say, sorry, but I have to leave. I have to go home, or I have to study, or I have to call a friend. And you will end that conversation because it is toxic. Correct? The same way with stress, right? When you have a situation and you feel stressful, if you're self aware, you know you're stressful. Your heart is beating a little bit faster. You might start sweating a little bit. You might start getting a little bit worried. But as long as it is not creating a situation where it's dangerous or unhealthy, it is not toxic, right? So, for example, you have a deadline for an assignment. Okay, so right now in India, it's probably around 9 o'clock. I guess it's 7:45 a.m. for me. So you're 12 and a half hours ahead. So it's night for you. Let's say you have a deadline today, at midnight, right? You will have a little bit of stress because you haven't finished your work. So it's a good kind of stress if it lets you work fast and quickly finish things and submit it on time. But if you start getting severe chest pain, you feel you're going to faint, you get dizzy or you have diarrhea, that's definitely toxic, right? So it's very important to read about the signs, positive and negative stress, and be very self aware of how you feel internally.
Another question from Vijay Lakshmi. Ma'am, how do I become more resilient to overcome stress?
That's a very good question. So, in the last few years, there has been a lot of research on how do we become more resilient. And what some of the research suggests is that when people are young, when we're children, when we're teenagers, when we're college or university students, if we learn to be resilient, then we will end up being resilient probably for the rest of our life. So, some of the ways we can learn to be resilient are learning to be positive. Positivity is a tremendous positive thing in our lives, right? Positivity. So, when people are generally happy, they smile a lot, they're friendly, a bit easygoing, they don't get too stressed out, right? We would say, oh, they're very positive people, right? So when you're positive, you have a protective factor in your life. You're able to take things a little bit more easily. So when you get bad news and you're by nature a positive person, you will say, too bad this happened, but that's okay. Next time I will do better. Or it's okay. Next time I will figure out a way to have a more successful outcome. So becoming positive and learning to be more positive and creating more positive thoughts in our mind, perceiving things, in a more positive rather than negative way is a great way to learn to be resilient. The other way we can be resilient is by changing our perception about things. So, for example, let's just say that you called your friend and you said, hey, can we go for a movie this weekend? And your friend says, hey, mujhko time nahi hai. If you say, oh, my friend hates me, that's why my friend is not coming with me for a movie, and that's your perception, you probably will not feel good. You'll feel bad and you'll feel sad and you might feel angry. But let's just say you look at it in a different way and you say, oh, maybe my friend is busy, or maybe there's something going on for my friend. That's okay. I will call my friend in about 2 weeks and go for another movie maybe. So your perception, how you understand something will change the way you react to it. We have control over how we react to it. So there is a saying, it is not the stress, the load of the stress that hurts us, it's the way we carry it. So we should learn to carry the stress, the load of the stress in a different way, in a more positive way, and that will help us become more resilient. So if you just go Google how to become more resilient, you will find a lot of good tips and ideas, and you can practice it and get better at it.
Yes, ma'am. Another question is, why is it important to talk to someone about the problem, and who should be the person that we speak to?
So, generally speaking, it's good to talk to someone because it reduces your load, right? So, for example, let's just say you go shopping, okay? You go to buy fruits and vegetables and milk for your family, and you take uh, two bags, two cloth bags, and you fill it up. And you bought a few more extra things. So now the grocery store, the supermarket gives you a third bag. You only have, you know, hands with which you can carry, say, two bags. And now there's a third bag. If you try to carry all three heavy bags, the load is too much and it will be stressful and difficult. But let's say another shopper comes along and says, Shobhana, let me carry your bag. Or if they don't know my name and they say, madam, let me carry your bag for you. It reduces my stress. It makes it easier for me to take my things, to my scooter or my car or to my auto rickshaw, right? So talking to someone helps us reduce our load, reduce the stress. But apart from that, talking to someone helps us get another perspective, another viewpoint, correct? So, for example, nowadays during COVID, we know that a lot of people are trying to find out ways in which hand sanitizer can be disposed. In India, they have some innovative ways. With your leg, you can just press, this pedal, and the hand sanitizer comes to your hand. You don't need to touch anything. It came because somebody had a different perspective about how to make sanitizers available to everybody. Correct? And now we all have that good solution in our workplaces or in our universities or in our homes. So when we talk to somebody, we get a different viewpoint, we get a different perspective, and it helps us think about a problem from a new angle. And what we thought was a big problem might actually be a smaller problem, and then we feel better about it. So it's really important to talk to somebody. But what is important is there are certain things talking to a friend or a family member or a teacher might help. There are certain problems you definitely need to try and get professional help. So it's important to also be aware of that.
Ma'am, a last question. I think after this we can do the exercise. How do deep breathing exercise help manage stressful moments? Okay,
Fantastic.
there are more questions coming up. There are more questions coming
Very
up.
good.
Yeah.
So, deep breathing relaxes our body and mind. So, if you go and just Google, or if you go to YouTube and you just put effects of deep breathing and meditation on the brain, it will show you how our brain responds to deep breathing and meditation, and how the chemicals that are produced when we are stressed starts to actually reduce or disappear as a result of deep breathing and meditation. So basically what it is, it allows us to calm down, and it brings the level of stress down. And it also allows us and helps us forget things for a couple of moments or minutes, so that we have that place of stillness and peace to go to. So it's very important that we find time for deep breathing and for meditation in our daily life. So, for example, in my case, I have a very busy life with work and home and children and my mother and my hobbies and volunteer work. But I always try to start my day with about 15-20 minutes of some deep breathing and meditation, play some music, and just quietly sit and breathe and meditate. And also try to do the same towards the end of the day. And then during the day, if I have a difficult time or it's a stressful day or there's something not going well for me, I do a very simple exercise, which is a technique that my executive coach taught me a couple of years ago when I was working in government. And she said, it's a very simple exercise, Shobana. You can do this many times during the day or a couple of times, and it will really make you feel very calm. And it's very important to be calm to be successful in our personal and professional life. So I want all of you to try and do this exercise with me. And I hope you'll feel good at the end of it and practice it. So, what I want all of you to do is to sit comfortably, just relax, sit comfortably, and put your hands maybe on the side of your chair or on your lap and just be comfortable. And then close your eyes and take a deep breath through your nose. And then very slowly imagine you have a straw in your mouth and you're breathing out through that straw. Once again, keep your eyes closed. Take a deep breath through your nose. Hold it for a second or two. And very slowly release it slowly through your mouth. And imagine you're releasing your breath through a straw. And let's do it one last time. Closing your eyes, take a deep breath through your nose, hold it for a second or two, and then very slowly release it through your mouth as if you're blowing it out through a straw. And very gently open your eyes. I hope you felt good when you did it. If you do this repeatedly many times, couple of times during the day, you will find that you feel much better. The tension on your shoulders, around your face, your jaw, around across your body, you feel much more relaxed when you do deep breathing and you do that controlled release of your breath. So there are many such exercises. Many of you probably do yoga, and definitely uh, practice these techniques. You don't need much time, you don't need much space. You can do it in very small spaces or large spaces. You can go do it in a park or in your room, and you'll feel much better.
There are some more questions. Can I take few more
Oh,
questions?
absolutely.
So, someone has asked, due to high stress level, I'm feeling suicidal. How do I tackle this situation?
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. I think one of the first things that you can tell yourself is that we all go through very difficult times in our life. Every human being that you know, I know, has gone through very difficult times. And right now, if you're going through a very difficult time, there are many reasons for it. Some of those reasons are within your control, other reasons are not within your control. But whatever might be causing you to feel so stressed, it is important for you to immediately get help. So, what I would encourage you to do is to do a lot of deep breathing after this session today, to be calm, to think about how you can get some help. Use the helpline. I've left the links for you. Depending on which state in India you are, you can select the number and you can talk to somebody tonight. You can talk to somebody tomorrow morning and you can tell them what is going on for you. If it is difficult for you to get help through the helpline, after the session today, you can talk to a friend. If you cannot make a phone call, if there are people in your home or in your hostel, you cannot talk comfortably, you can message them through WhatsApp. You can message them through Facebook. Talk to somebody. Reduce your burden tonight and go to sleep believing that for every problem, there is a solution. Sometimes we can find the solution within ourselves. Sometimes we have to get that solution with help from somebody else on the outside. But what seems like a very big problem today, in 1 year, in 10 years, might be a very small problem to you. We all go through difficult times. All of us go through difficult times. But we have the capacity to change that. So don't lose heart. Don't give up. Your life is precious. You are precious and you are special. And you will feel differently once you talk to somebody and you get help. Sometimes what you're feeling could be because of stress factors in your life. Other times, it could be because there are genetic issues or there are actual chemical imbalances in your brain that is making you feel that way. So, the only way you can really get help is by talking to somebody. And sometimes counseling is enough. Sometimes talking to a friend is enough. Sometimes taking medication, antidepressants may be needed. But whatever it is, the first step is to tell yourself you can change your situation. And I hope that you will talk to someone tonight, you will call the helpline, or you'll talk to a friend, or you'll reach out to one of your professors, and you will make a change. And I hope you feel better. and take care.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is, what if we know someone's nature is toxic, but there's something that doesn't allow us to really accept that thing? So we're still in denial.
Yes, relationships are very complex, isn't it? We all go through life where we have all kinds of relationships. Some of those relationships make us very happy, they bring out the best in us. We feel great when we are with that person, and we miss that person when we are not with them. It could be our parents, it could be our brothers and sisters, it could be our partner, it could be our teachers. And then there are other relationships that make us feel so bad. It makes us feel terrible. We feel horrible when we're with that person because it's so toxic. We don't feel we're worthy of love. We feel ugly. We don't feel good about ourselves. We don't feel good about life when we're with that person. Those are the toxic relationships. And I will send a link to Ramya later to share with your group about interview that I did a while ago about relationship violence, and I talk about toxic relationships in it and what we can do. So I'll try and share it with all of you. So the reason why we are sometimes in a toxic relationship is because we do not have confidence, and we do not think that we are worthy of love, we're worthy of kindness, we're worthy of respect. And this happens because we sometimes don't love ourselves, we don't respect ourselves, and we are not kind to ourselves in the first place. So when we don't appreciate ourselves, then we lack that confidence, that self love, self respect. So when somebody else treats us badly, we sometimes believe we deserve that. We think I am not worthy of love. So when this person treats me badly, that's what I'm worthy of. So it's very important to understand toxic relationships are bad for you. They're bad for your mental health, they're bad for your physical health, and they don't help us lead a good and successful life. So the moment we understand and we know we're in a toxic relationship, usually first we go through denial. We say नहीं ऐसा नहीं है वो एक अच्छा अ, अ, लड़का है ये नहीं तो लड़की है we rationalize and we are in denial because we care about that person or we are attracted to that person, so we deny there is a problem, right? And then it gets worse, it gets bigger, and then we realize we cannot deny this anymore. At that time, sometimes we get afraid to break off that relationship or to leave that individual or to go far away. Even if it's our own family, we're scared to take that first step. That is quite natural. And that's why it's important to talk to somebody. I'm in a toxic relationship. It's not good. I need to change this situation, but I don't know how to do it, or I'm afraid how to do it. And if the friend or family member or teacher cannot help you, then talk to a counselor, call a helpline. There are ways in which you can get help. But if we don't get out of that toxic relationship, as time goes on, we will have physical problems, we will have cognitive problems, we will have psychological problems, and we might become depressed and suicidal because that toxicity is so serious. So, the very fact that we are asking this question is a good thing. It's very important to understand healthy relationships and toxic relationships, just as we need to understand healthy food and unhealthy food. So, thanks for that question.
Yes, ma'am. Uh, what is burnout and how to deal with burnout?
That's a very good question. So, imagine a candle, okay? The lights go off and you light a candle, and the candle burns, it burns, it burns, and then in the end, there's no candle and there's no light because the candle has burnt out. So, burnout basically refers to us getting so stressed out or so worked up about something that we're not able to function well anymore. You can't think well, you can't do anything and your behavior is very irrational or erratic. You get angry, you get sad, you get upset, you're sort of scatterbrained. That's because you're burnt out. And it happens because we carry too much stress and we take too much on that our body and mind can't take it anymore. So, for example, if for 10 days or 1 week you don't sleep enough, you will get burnt out because your body is so tired, so fatigued, it can't function anymore. So it'll crash and it'll burn. If you carry a lot of mental load, mental stress, you will have a breakdown. No, हमको मालूम है ना, breakdown क्या है, nervous breakdown or psychological breakdown. That's because of excessive, too much stress. So burnout is preventable. It can be managed. It has signs. So if you go read up on some of the signs, it's usually you're beginning to get stressed out. And when too much stress happens, there is a risk that you will get burnt out.
Thank you, ma'am. One last question. How to create strong bonds with people around us, which will help us de-stress us?
I love that question. Um, I'm someone who values relationships, and I think the main reason why I am happy as an individual and I generally experience a lot of peace and calm within me internally is because of the bonds I have with people. People in my personal life and people in my professional life. So, having strong bonds is like building a home. It has to have a strong foundation. If the foundation is not strong, no matter how beautiful, how expensive the materials are in building the wall and the roof, the house will start to crash or have cracks or fall down one day. Correct? So in our life also, we need a strong foundation for our relationships. The foundation is built on certain things. Trust. We need to be able to trust people and we need to allow others to trust us, and our behaviors should be such that others can trust us, right? So we need to actually develop trust with people. The second one is respect. Respect is such an important part of relationships. If we don't respect each other, we don't treat each other as equals, it's very difficult to have positive and strong relationships. Relationships are like gardens. So if you have a garden or if you have a small pot with a small plant in it, if you don't make sure that has sunshine, it has water, you take care of it, it will not grow, right? So if you have a rose plant in your garden, but you don't give it water, you don't have sunshine in that area, you don't trim the rose bush every year, it will not have buds and flowers. It's the same thing with relationships. We have to nurture it, we have to take care of it. It needs to be taken care of for it to grow. And relationships cannot be positive unless we ourselves are positive. Unless I love myself, I respect myself, I believe I'm worthy, of self-respect, I'm worthy of other people's respect. If I'm not having those kind of positive thoughts and ideas in my own self, it's very difficult for me to have a positive relationship with others. So some of these things help us build relationships. But if you ask me to pick one or two critical factors, I would say it's respect and it's trust that makes bonds very strong.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an informative and insightful session. And thank you so much for taking out time and being with us today. Uh, Chitraji, would you like to join me in thanking Madam, please?
Hello, Shobna ji.
Right, Chitra?
Thank you so much for the wonderful session. I'm sure the students must have gained so many important aspects today, especially the science which you've spoken about. How to identify when you're undergoing stress. I feel this is so important because I've seen so many individuals who have been under stressful condition, who have, who face problems related to health, and they're not aware. They visit the physician day after day, and yet they're not able to solve their problems. And I'm so thankful that you have also offered a solution in terms of, a lot of exercises you have given, and especially the last one, the breathing exercise, which you've spoken about. It is so easy, it is so convenient. I am sure students can do it, on the train also, or in the classroom also. So I'm extremely grateful to you, Shobna ji, for this session. I'm sure students are going to take a lot today at home, and it's going to be really useful to them. All the tips which you have given. Thank you so much.
I just want to say one last concluding statement, if I can. I know these are very difficult times, especially during exams, during COVID. And as students, one of the things you have to remember is that this is just a phase. All phases have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And to the one student who was very brave to share that they're feeling very stressed and suicidal, I want you to just remember this is also a phase. Things will get better, and you're capable of making things better. You're worthy of love, you're worthy of respect, and a good life. And it's just around the corner from you, probably. So have a good night's sleep. Don't be stressed out. Do some deep breathing. Talk to somebody. And I hope when you wake up tomorrow, you'll have a different perspective. And all the best to all the students for your upcoming exams.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.